Have you ever wanted to be somewhere so badly? I mean, maybe it's a close friend's wedding, or a highly anticipated industry conference, or even just a crowded, buzzing restaurant you've been dying to try. But the very act of being in that physical space completely and utterly drained you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is such a universal but overlooked feeling.
Right, you deeply wanted the experience, but the environment itself felt like it was charging you this, impossibly high physical or mental entry fee.
It's a profound paradox, honestly. Your mind and your intentions are saying, I want to be here, I value this experience, but your body is just sending up flare after flare saying, we cannot sustain the sensory load of this room.
Exactly.
And that friction between wanting to participate in public life and being physically punished by the spaces where that life happens, it's something most people rarely even have to think about.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. Usually when we see someone buckle under the weight of an environment, society makes a very quick, very harsh snap judgment.
Yeah, we really do.
We see someone leave early or shut down or become overwhelmed, and we just assume, they just don't want to be here.
Right. They're not interested.
But today, we are completely dismantling that assumption. We are diving into a profoundly perspective-shifting essay by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks, and that's pronounced J-A-M-E, by the way.
Yes. Such a fantastic piece.
It really is. The piece is called Access Before Disaster, Autistic Desire and the World is Built. And for our listeners, it's the 8th installment in her ongoing series, The First Autistic Person.
And I think we should clarify right up front, the mission of this deep dive goes way beyond the standard conversations we usually hear about disability accommodation.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just about, retrofitting a building with a ramp.
Right, or pointing to a quiet room after someone is already having a crisis.
Yeah.
We're exploring a completely new lens on how the physical and social world is built, who it is built for, and the often overlooked political reality of what Dr. Hoerricks calls autistic desire.
We're looking at the literal blueprints of our society here. The goal today is to reframe accessibility entirely, shifting away from this reactive idea of rescuing people after they struggle, and instead looking at the environment itself.
Which is a massive paradigm shift.
It is. So let's unpack the core misunderstanding that Dr. Hoerricks brings up right at the beginning. It really serves as the foundation for her entire argument.
You mean the difference between reaction and desire?
Exactly. The critical difference between a person's reaction to an environment and their actual desire to be in it.
Yeah, society gets this wrong almost universally. I mean, consider the classic scenario we've all likely witnessed or at least imagined an autistic person having a meltdown at a busy shopping mall.
Right.
Or perhaps losing the ability to speak in a really loud, chaotic, echoing room. The immediate default assumption from onlookers is to equate the distress with a rejection of the experience.
They assume, they cannot do malls, they cannot handle crowds.
You know, they don't want to be here.
We mistake the reaction for a refusal. We see the collapse, and we treat it as a definitive conclusion about their preferences.
But Dr. Hoerricks states emphatically, and I'd say this is the quote that anchors the entire piece. She says, "Collapse is not evidence against desire. It proves the cost."
Wow. It proves the cost. That distinction just changes everything.
It really does. And the text lists all these incredibly mundane things that Dr. Hoerricks actively desires. She isn't asking for, extraordinary specialized treatment.
Right. She's not asking for the moon here.
No. She writes about wanting an uneventful trip to the mall. She wants a classroom where her body doesn't have to bargain with every single surface and sound.
A meeting that just ends normally.
Exactly. Without her having to calculate the energy required to simply exit the room. She desires the small public life that other people just call nothing.
So to help you, the listener, visualize how wild society's assumption is, imagine you just won front row tickets to your absolute favorite band.
Oh, I'd be thrilled.
Right. You desperately want to be there. But the venue secretly requires you to run a full, grueling marathon just to get from your car to your seat.
Okay, that sounds horrible.
It is. But you run it anyway, pushing your body to the absolute physiological limit. When you finally reach the front row, you just collapse on the floor from total exhaustion.
Because of course you would.
Naturally. But then the people standing around you look down and say, wow, they must really hate this music.
Which is just absurd.
Completely absurd.
No one would ever assume you hated the music in that scenario.
Yeah.
They would instantly recognize that you wanted the music, but the entrance fee was impossibly high.
But that's exactly what happens in reality.
Yes. When it comes to autistic individuals navigating public spaces, society makes that exact leap in logic. We arrive at this deeply ingrained ableist conclusion. If it overwhelms you, you do not want it.
If the environment hurts you, the accepted solution is simply for you to stop desiring the environment.
Exactly. We mistake the injury for the desire and the aftermath for a refusal.
So if the collapse proves the cost, we have to ask who is setting the price. I want to break down this illusion that the ordinary world is somehow a neutral baseline.
Oh, this is such an important part of her essay. The myth of the neutral ordinary is precisely what Dr. Hoerricks is targeting.
She calls this price the tax, right?
Yes, the tax. And it isn't just the overwhelming event itself. The tax is the delayed collapse. It's the lost speech hours later.
Oh, wow.
It's the shame of not being able to function in a space everyone else finds effortless. It's waking up the next morning and realizing your entire day is just gone because your nervous system is still trapped in recovery mode just from a trip to the grocery store.
She also mentions the tax of disbelief from others, which I found so striking.
Yes, because an autistic person might mask their discomfort to survive the outing, people say, but you seemed fine until you didn't.
Because the world looks at a brightly lit supermarket with background music playing, overlapping conversations, thousands of highly saturated visual stimuli, and just says, what's the big deal? This is ordinary.
And there is a phrase from the text that completely shatters that assumption. Dr. Hoerricks writes, sensory life is civilizational evidence.
Sensory life is civilizational evidence. Let's unpack that for a second. She's saying the way a space is built tells us exactly who society expects to be in it.
Right. And whose comfort is considered mandatory versus whose is considered optional.
It reveals what bodies a culture expects.
And what bodies a culture punishes, and what bodies a culture simply calls inconvenient. The ordinary world is not a naturally occurring phenomenon, It is highly and intentionally designed.
Oh, completely. It's artificially lit, electronically amplified,
Synthetically scented, aggressively crowded, rigidly scheduled, and heavily policed. All of it. The blueprint of a modern building contains massive, built-in assumptions about what human bodies can ignore.
It assumes what your skin can push to the background.
What your ears can filter out, and what your speech can do under intense sensory pressure.
So when an autistic person enters that highly designed ordinary space and struggles, it's not because they are inherently broken or failing at a neutral task.
Not at all.
It's because the design of the space is actively clashing with their nervous system. But that paints a completely different picture than the clinical language we usually hear.
Oh, absolutely. The source material points out that the DSM, the diagnostic manual used by psychiatry, reduces all of this lived experience down to, quote, hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input.
Which feels so clinical and detached.
It really is. The clinical language of the DSM locates the problem entirely within the individual. It pathologizes the person by saying, you are too reactive, your settings are wrong.
Which is a very convenient framing for society, isn't it? Because it absolves the environment of any responsibility.
Precisely. If the problem is simply your hyperreactivity, then the architect doesn't have to rethink the fluorescent lighting.
The store owner doesn't have to turn down the music.
And the employer doesn't have to change the open plan office. But Dr. Hoerricks flips that entire model. She is saying the environment is demanding too much and charging a sensory tax her body literally cannot pay.
Let me play devil's advocate here for a moment, though, because someone listening might be thinking about the logistics of design.
Sure, go ahead.
Isn't ordinary just the statistical average? I mean, designers and architects generally build for the majority.
That's the common argument, yeah.
Right. So if a space is truly overwhelming for someone, if those fluorescent lights cause actual physical pain, or if a loud networking event causes a shutdown, isn't telling that person to just stay home and avoid those triggers actually a form of pragmatic kindness? Like, this hurts you, so protect yourself and don't do it.
It's a really valid question, and Dr. Hoerricks anticipates that exact pushback. She doesn't romanticize harm at all.
Okay.
And she openly admits that there is genuine wisdom in retreat. Sometimes the safest, most necessary decision is the sanctuary of home, the safe food, the known fabric, the quiet room.
Right, creating that safe baseline.
Exactly. The critical turn in her argument, though, is that there is profound violence in turning avoidance into the only available accommodation.
Ah, I see. Because that shifts the entire burden onto the autistic person. They become responsible for their own disappearance.
Exactly. She calls it self-exclusion. When society's only solution is stay home if it's too loud, It makes the individual responsible for erasing themselves from public life.
Instead of making the world responsible for becoming less punishing.
Right. It treats participation in society as a privilege that's conditional upon your ability to endure pain silently. The underlying message is basically that the problem is solved if you just stop wanting a life that costs too much.
Which brings us to a major paradigm shift in the essay. The distinction between extraction and accommodation.
Yes, this part is brilliant.
Because these two concepts look similar from the outside, but their mechanics are entirely different.
Society constantly confuses extraction with accommodation. We confuse a late rescue with actual support.
Which is a dangerous confusion.
Very. The text juxtaposes these two concepts to show how extraction is fundamentally conditional. Extraction says, "We will let you leave once you have proven you cannot stay."
Wow. We will let you leave once you prove you can't stay. Whereas accommodation says, you may leave before proving it.
Yes. Extraction says, "We will make space for you only after you lose speech or have a public meltdown."
But accommodation says, we will not require your speech or your suffering as the price of being helped.
Exactly.
Let's apply this to a non-disability context to really highlight the absurdity of extraction. Think about your own workplace, right? Imagine a company with an incredibly toxic, high-pressure culture.
The setting scene.
You're working 80 hours a week, dealing with constant hostility, and eventually you have a massive panic attack right at your desk.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It is. And then management rushes over, looks at you shaking, and says, take the rest of the week off for mental health.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
That is extraction. They only permitted you to leave after you provided undeniable physical proof that you were breaking. True accommodation would be fixing the toxic culture so the panic attack never happens in the first place.
That toxic workplace analogy perfectly captures the dynamic. Society loves extraction because it feels like compassion.
Right. The manager in your scenario probably feels so benevolent for offering the time off.
Exactly. We call it support because someone eventually noticed the meltdown and intervened. But as Dr. Hoerricks points out, an intervention during a crisis does not erase the trauma of the crisis itself.
Because the damage is already done.
Yes. A door opened after you have already broken against it is not the same as a door that was designed to open for you in the first place.
A door opened after you have already broken against it. That is such a haunting image. And it really captures the exhaustion of having to constantly prove your limits.
It does. And this moves the essay from a reflection on personal experience into a sweeping political demand. It brings us to the core thesis and the title of the piece, Access Before Disaster.
So what does that demand actually look like in practice?
Well, the demand is beautifully simple, but requires a radical restructuring of how we view public space. She says, "I asked for the door to open before I broke against it."
A ramp brought out only after someone falls down the stairs is not access.
Exactly. A quiet room offered only after someone has completely lost their ability to speak or process information is not access. It is crisis management.
It's reactive, not proactive.
Right. Dr. Hoerricks argues that after is merely an apology. After is an explanation. After is bringing flowers for a wound that never had to happen.
So true access is the lighting being adjustable before the room goes blank for the person.
Yes. Access is touch arriving only with explicit consent. Access is being believed about your limits before your physical evidence becomes irreversible damage.
I have to ask about the sheer scale of this demand, though. We're talking about altering the fundamental fabric of how society operates.
A massive undertaking, yeah.
Because the text notes that sensory processing isn't just an individual quirk. It is the exact intersection where architecture, capitalism, schooling, medicine, and public space all collide with the human nervous system.
It's everywhere.
Right. So how does a society even begin to achieve access before disaster when the ordinary world is so deeply entrenched?
Well, the essay doesn't pretend this is an easy logistical fix. It is a monumental task that challenges the bedrock of modern design and social expectation.
It's not just a quick policy change.
No, not at all. What the text does is force a reevaluation of our priorities by asking one central, unavoidable question. Who gets to want the world without being punished for wanting it?
Who gets to want the world without being punished for wanting it? That cuts right to the heart of it. It's about the right to desire participation.
It forces you to look at every system we've built, from the layout of a grocery store to the structure of a corporate meeting, and ask whose comfort was considered default in the literal blueprints.
Right, and whose comfort is considered a special favor.
Exactly. Who is allowed to desire a mundane public life without having to become either an inspirational story of overcoming adversity or a cautionary tale of failure? Who naturally gets access before the disaster?
For everyone listening to this deep dive, the immediate takeaway changes how we interact with the people and spaces around us. It means we have to stop demanding proof of pain before we offer space or grace.
We really do. We have to recognize that autistic desire is real.
It is real when someone has a meltdown at the mall. It is real when they shut down in a meeting, when they have to leave a party early.
Or when they push through and stay too long, paying a heavy sensory tax the entire next day.
The desire to be part of the world never vanished.
Yeah.
The world just refused to become survivable for them.
And the burden should not rest on the individual to simply stop wanting to exist in public spaces. The burden must shift to the world to stop taxing their existence so heavily.
Right. We need to move from a culture that relies on extraction, waiting for the collapse, to a culture of true proactive accommodation.
Which is the whole point of access before disaster.
Yeah. We started out talking about that feeling of wanting to be somewhere, but the environment itself draining the life out of you. We explored the idea of running a marathon just to sit in the front row of a concert.
Which, again, sounds exhausting.
Completely. And how absurd it would be for someone to see your exhaustion and assume you hated the music. Dr. Hoerricks is challenging us to stop making that exact flawed assumption about autistic individuals who are simply trying to navigate a deeply inaccessible world.
She really is. And, as you move through your own workplace, your city, or your social circles tomorrow, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought inspired by Dr. Hoerricks' work.
I'd love to hear it.
She asks, what kind of world needs us to break before it believes we wanted to enter? Take a look at the literal and metaphorical doors around you.
Like the unwritten rules of an office or the sensory environment of a local cafe.
Right, the expectations placed on participation. Ask yourself, who is currently breaking against these doors just to prove they want to be inside? And what would it take for us to simply open them first?